Hello YouTube, welcome back to another deck profile with me, Chocobilly, and this week I'm going to be looking at a strange little concoction, but it works surprisingly well given how many elements and how few unique cards there are. Anyway, yeah, so this week I'm going to be looking at Onion Ninjas. So as you can see here, it's obviously themed heavily around the Ninja engine, utilizing cards like Edge, Gecko, and Tsukinoa, but it also throws in the Onion Knight engine as well, with the new addition in Opus 16, the Fire Sage Onion Knight. And the reason behind this really was the fact that the Onion Knights and the Ninjas tend to revolve around a similar sort of element cycle, and because of the fact that Edge is able to make so many, or make your ninjas be able to play with any element, it means that it's very easy to get their backups down in the correct elements. However, with the Onion Knights, it tends to be a case of you're really only focusing on either the fire or the wind Onion Knights, and the singular lightning Onion Knight is just in there just for more of the combo sake than anything else, but he is still there if you do need to play him. So let's work our way through the cards then, starting with the forwards. And starting with the most important card in the deck, Edge. So he can reduce the cost of your ninjas by 1 CP, which in and of itself is excellent, but then all your ninjas can be paid with CP of any element. So that, again, is just fantastic. Just being able to play, you know, your 2 CP backups for only 1 CP and without having to worry about element is great. So a lot of the time you see this card get played first. I obviously run 3 in this deck, but actually what I prefer to do is try to just get a 2 CP backup down. That way I can then play Edge the following turn and then dole that 1 2 CP backup, or dole up 1 backup, sorry, to play another 2 CP backup. So therefore you're not just playing Edge and then playing another 2 CP backup just for overpayment, unless of course you can play something like Miner, who would only cost you 2 CP at that point to then search yourself something else. But either way, he is integral to this deck, and so you're obviously going to want to have ways to protect him and also recur him as well. And then the other great thing about him as well is the fact that he can then use his counters to then deal 3k to forwards. I mean, it could be your forwards if you really want to, if you want to work in some sort of combo, but ultimately it's best just to get rid of your opponent's forwards. And he gains a counter for every single ninja that enters the field, regardless if it's their job or not, but it doesn't include himself. This ninja, so what's great about Edge is the fact that he doesn't have the stipulation of it cannot become 0 when reducing a ninja's cost, so this ninja actually does become completely free. So let's say hypothetically you were to play Edge and then play Miner to then search this ninja, you could then play this ninja onto the field completely for free. Now, his ability isn't great. You pay 2 wind, and if ninja deals damage to a forward this turn, double the damage instead. So, not particularly great. However, you can combo this with the Fire Ninja backup, which choose a forward, it gains when this forward attacks, it deals 5,000 to damage to something. So if you chose this ninja, for example, you then successfully attacked with this ninja and you paid to win, he would actually then deal 10k to something, which is a funny little combo. I only include 1 of this ninja in this deck. I did used to have more, but then the new Fire Sage Onion Knight came out and I had to make space for it, and this is the first to go. But it is fun, and if you want to focus more on ninjas, less on Onion Knights, then this is a good card to include, which sounds weird, but actually I enjoyed playing it quite a bit because it's very insulting to your opponent. Tsukinoa. This is really the grease in the gears, this card. Being able to play Tsukinoa onto the field and then reactivate, choose the same number of characters you control as Job Ninja or Card Ninja you control, activate them. So it's not just your backups as well, it can activate your forwards. So you can attack with a load of forwards, play Tsukinoa for potentially 2 if you've got Edge, then reactivate as many characters and ninjas you have, which is really, really good. It means that if you've got 3 backups and you play Tsukinoa and he's the only other ninja you control, you get all 3 backups back, so he's at least a free card. And then you can pay a wind, and Tsukinoa can be blocked by a forward of 5 or more. Not that great, to be honest, because most forwards these days that are above that are quite low in power anyway, unless there's something like BFA. But still, it is nice if you are able to remove those forwards that are of a lower power and allow Tsukinoa to swing through. Zangetsu, so this is very much the push card. So when Zangetsu enters the field, choose up to the same number of characters your opponent controls as Job Ninja or Card Name Ninja you control, dull them. So yeah, you play Zangetsu onto the field and he is, let's say, your 4th or 5th ninja, you get to dull out 4 or 5 characters, and that is really good because it's your opponent's backups as well. So if they've got a problematic backup, you can see back there, maybe something like Althea, you can dull it, forcing their hand to have to use their ability then and not use it as some sort of combat trick. And then you can also pay lightning. Zangetsu gains haste until the end of the turn, so that means he can dull all your opponent's forwards out, and then you can haste through and hopefully deal your opponent that final point of damage. Hooded Man, so not a ninja, but still equally as integral to the deck. So obviously you can't play him onto the field if you control a card named Kane, but there's one in the deck, so that's fine. But he's an EX burst. When Hooded Man enters the field, choose one category 4 forward other than a card named Hooded Man in your break zone, add it to your hand. At the end of each of your turns, activate all the category 4 forwards you control. So that is all of the 4 ninjas: Edge, Zangetsu, Gecko, Izayoi if you want to run it, and also Sukinoa. So that means all of those guys can be retrieved back to your hand when you play this card into the field, and also will stand back up at the end of your turn if they are dull, which is 1, really good counter to ice, but also 2, just great, means you can apply the pressure with attacking whilst also still having those blockers on the following turn. Gecko. So I opt to run this Gecko over the, I can't remember what Opus is from now, but the later Gecko. The main reason being is the fact that that Gecko, when it enters the field, does deal damage and it can absolutely nuke something. But one of the biggest drawbacks to this deck is that you can go wide really quickly, but the instant your opponent plays Shantoto, Susano, some sort of board clear, you're going to start to struggle to kind of get those cards back, especially if they're removed. So playing something like Gecko to then play something else again is great for starting to build back up if you need to. And also it does have a defensive mechanism as well, paying a fire and anything else, all job ninja or card name ninja you control gain plus 1,000 power until the end of the turn, which might be enough to push them out of the way of something like Susano. If you've got a few forwards and you can maybe discard a couple of fire cards from hand, they then become maybe 9 or 10k, and just push them out of the way of certain damage that might kill them. But yeah, let's say your opponent plays a Shantoto, or your forwards die, you could then maybe the following turn play Gecko back into something else, and you've immediately got those 2 forwards back of a reasonable power, and you know, it's just a good way to be able to kind of oppress your opponent even after a board clear. Gesso, a really powerful card. So this card becoming only a 4 CP is really good, and when Gesso enters the field, your opponent reveals their hand, select one card from the hand, your opponent removes it from the game, and the fact that it's removed from game is just equally powerful. It just means that they don't have a say in it, it just disappears and there's not much they can do about it. Now you obviously have to bear in mind that even though your ninjas have to be paid, or can be paid of any element, if you have Edge on the field, you still need to pay at least 2 elements with Gesso because he's multi-element. It sounds weird, but yeah, ultimately Gesso has to be paid with 2, so it's just, yeah, a bit weird. Onion Knight. So this is where you start to get a bit of the blurring of lines, but actually there is some cohesion here as well, because this Onion Knight is a job ninja, which means that he can be played onto the field with any CP color because of Edge, and similarly his cost will also be reduced because of Edge. And then when Onion Knight enters the field or attacks, choose 1 forward, deal it 3,000 damage, and then when Onion Knight enters the field, choose a card name Onion Knight of any element except wind in your break zone, add it to your hand. So now we have the new Fire Sage Onion Knight, we also have the Lightning Sage Onion Knight, and then there is the Light Onion Knight as well. And then you can use this S ability to place Onion Knight at the bottom of your deck. If you do so, search for one card named Onion Knight with Job Sage and play it onto the field. And that is why this card is now included, because it is a Job Sage and it's a nice alternative to the Lightning. However, I actually think I still prefer the Lightning Sage Onion Knight, because when Onion Knight enters the field, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. That isn't optional, you have to discard 2 cards. And if you are playing Onion Knight into the field and then you're having to discard, say, an Edge and Sukinoa or Gecko from your hand, which actually isn't going to be that good for, you know, this deck, because if you find that a lot of your forwards are dying and then you're also actively discarding them into the break zone as well, not great. You also need to be careful of, you know, too much mill and acceleration, because if you're drawing 2 cards, that might push you 1 turn ahead to death if your opponent is trying to mill you out as well. But ultimately, it is good if you play as Onion Knight into the field and you can ditch 2 Onion Knights into the break zone, because that then synergizes really well with the Fire Wind Onion Knight. But as I mentioned, I still run the Lightning Sage Onion Knight, because you can ultimately play the Wind Onion Knight onto the field, deal 3k to something, hopefully get that Sage or get an Onion Knight back to your hand, use the S ability to then go and search this Onion Knight to then deal a further 5k to that forward and hopefully kill it. Then we've got, I only run a singular one of this Light Onion Knight, and there is another Light Onion Knight you could choose over this, but I actually prefer this one. So when Onion Knight deals damage to your opponent, you may search for one card named Onion Knight and add it to your hand, and that's the main reason here that I run this Onion Knight. If you are able to just kind of push through this Onion Knight, and maybe you're struggling a little bit, you haven't been able to find the Onion Knights, just being able to get a point of damage through with this Onion Knight is really good, because then you can search that Onion Knight to hand and have that ready to then either use Blade Torrent or Meteor, or just when this one dies, play that onto the field. And then, honestly, the reason I built this deck, I really liked this card when it was revealed, but it was kind of a struggle to build it, and now that we have the new Fire Sage Onion Knight, it just adds a bit more cohesion to the deck, and yeah, just another Fire Onion Knight, which is nice. But when Onion Knight is put from the field into the break zone, you may play one Onion Knight from your hand onto the field, which in and of itself is actually quite nice. But then you can pay Fire, Wind, and remove 3 card named Onion Knight from the break zone from the game, choose up to 3 forwards, deal 9,000 damage. Now that isn't an insignificant amount of damage. 9k to 3 different forwards is really good. And again, another reason I built this deck is because to have Fire and Wind together, you could be running something like an FFTA deck with the likes of March and Ritz, but I wanted to run something a bit different. And yeah, this with all the Onion Knights, and there's quite a few in the deck, I think there's about 9, 10, it shouldn't be too hard to get 3 Onion Knights onto the field, and I have 3 of this Onion Knight in this deck, so, you know, the realistic, I mean, as long as you've got the Fire and the Wind backup, you probably will have the Onion Knights in the break zone, play this Onion Knight, and you then get to 9k, 3 different things, which I think is really cool. Right, moving on to backups now. Not a huge amount to say really, because they're all ninjas, and they're mostly 2CP ninjas as well, but all of them have decent backups. So Dull, put ninja in the break zone, choose one forward, it cannot block this turn. This synergizes well with the Light Onion Knight, because it's if you are able to use this ninja to then push through with the Light Onion Knight to then search yourself another Onion Knight, that's really, really good. And then you've got when Ninja enters the field, choose one damage forward, deal it 5,000 damage. So similar to Onion Knight, ironically. But if, say, you've got a singular counter on your edge, you can just chuck that here forward, then you play this ninja onto the field for only 1 CP, deal that forward a further 5k damage, and if that still hasn't killed that forward, this ninja entering will then give Edge another counter, which you can then throw at that forward, hopefully finish it off. Then you've got this ninja as well, so actually being able to have backup breaking abilities, and not just for yourself but against your opponent, is surprisingly good in this sort of meta, because you find that a lot of smaller forwards now are being run, and the likes of maybe Ovalia or Kuchaspel, which might just be kind of screwing with your deck, or just there being cards there, or the backups there that are having really horrible effects. Maybe your opponent has played Althea onto the field and they haven't had a chance to activate it to use its ability. Using Ninja to then choose that backup and break it is just really good. But also, you know, you can break your own backups to then make room for other ninjas to then gain more counters on Edge if you want to. So this is the ninja I was talking about earlier in reference to the little 1 CP Wind Ninja. So yeah, being able to choose a forward and it deal 5k on attack is really good, and again synergizes well with Edge, because a forward can attack, deal 5k, and then Edge slings a shuriken at them, and that's 8k dealt to that forward. Really good, synergizes again with the Lightning Ninja backup, as well as the Onion Knight as well. So lots of chip damage in this deck that works well with one another. But ultimately, the real big brain play here is to use this alongside the little 1 CP ninja, double the damage, deal 10k something, and just laugh in your opponent's face. Ninja, this one's alright, probably the weakest of the ninjas to be honest. So you pay 1 wind and dull, choose 1 wind forward, activate it, that's fine I guess, and then pay 2 wind, put ninja in the break zone, activate all the wind characters you control, which honestly probably won't be a huge amount. You might be about half of your field at best, to be honest, because wind is the larger proportion of the deck, but still being able to just break a backup and paying 2 wind just to reactivate maybe half of your field is probably not fantastic. But if you need to block, or you know, just get something in the way, that's not too bad. And you can use this alongside the Fire Wind Onion Knight, so if it blocks, it dies, it can then play another Onion Knight onto the field, which might be worth doing. So no crystal mechanics, so you don't need to worry about the ninja, but it does play mind games with your opponent if they're not sure what you're doing. You know, you could potentially be using it to reduce the cost of summons, so something like Remora, which can really screw with your opponent's plays if they have to consider stuff like that. And it would work in a deck like this as well, because of the fact that, you know, if you're dealing 3k to something, using Edge's shurikens, it means that you potentially have a 10k damage swing, which is really good for you. But then ultimately you can use Ninja, put it in the break zone, just to choose a forward and deal 1000 damage, which again works nicely with the other Ninja backup that you play onto the field to deal a further 5k, or similarly with the Sage Onion Knight as well. Minor, just ultimately the best one here because you can potentially play onto the field for 2, but it can search you any Job Ninja forward or Card Ninja forward and add to your hand. But this does also apply to the Onion Knight Ninja as well. So if you maybe already have worked your way through your ninjas, or you just want to start working on the Onion Knight, maybe you just want to go for Onion Knights first off, you can play Minor onto the field, then go search the Wind Onion Knight Ninja and start doing that. Right, and then we move on to the summons. So as I mentioned before, you probably want some form of protection for your Edge or some of the other forwards. Maybe you just want to protect your Onion Knights as well. Or you just want to stop some form of board clear. So maybe Cloud of Darkness, Shantoto, Susano, the ones I mentioned before. So having Amaterasu in hand and it's in the right elements, just to be able to cancel that is super important. And to be honest, this card is kind of the reason that the game is still fair. Some people would argue that it's not fair, but being able to cancel entry abilities is very important, and Amaterasu is a big part of that. So yeah, I think just having this card is probably a big thing. If you're playing lots of forwards onto the field, you are a massive threat of lots of entry abilities, so make sure to pack your Amaterasu. Chocobo, just more protection. Playing Chocobo to get your forwards back to your hand is quite effective, to be honest. What's also quite fun to do, horrible for your opponent, is play Gecko onto the field for reduced cost, remove a card from your hand, play Chocobo to put Gecko back in your hand, and play Gecko again. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a lot to be playing. You've paid probably a total of 10, technically 12 CP, and drawn a card back to your hand, but you've removed 2 of your opponent's cards, which, if you know they've got something horrible in hand, or some horrible things in hand, might well be worth it. Ultimately, just a stupid sort of thing that I like to do, but either way, really good protection for your forwards that you want to be sticking around, or just to replay. And then Bahamut Zero. Going wide fast is all well and good, but it's not really that great if you just can't push past. And if you've got forwards that can't be dealt damage, then you probably want something like Bahamut Zero just to break it. Just break that forward that can't be dealt damage, dull your opponent's forwards, and then all of a sudden you've got loads of forwards that can just push through and they haven't considered. And this is often a forward that doesn't get played that much, but I really think it's one of Lightning's best forwards because firstly it's it's just an outright break, but also it just hopefully gets rid of all your opponent's forwards. In the chance that they're running maybe something like Mart in a wind in a monk deck, where their forwards can't become dull, it's unlikely, but still it's an outright break, which is really, really useful. Right, time to move on to some honourable mentions. There's loads of good cards that could go into this deck. I haven't mentioned them all, but there are a few obvious ones to go with just to kind of help the consistency of this deck. So, Gecko, the Gecko that I chose not to include. So when he enters the field, choose one forward, your opponent controls it, deal it 2000 damage for each Job Ninja or Card Ninja you control. So you'll easily be dealing 8, 10, 12, 13, not the 13, but you know what I mean, Cade something. And then you can also give him Brave at the end of the turn, which means that he can be a blocker as well. But this is one of the reasons that I choose the other Gecko as well, is because you've got something like Hooded Man, which can stand Gecko up anyway, so you don't need to worry about Brave, unless of course your opponent is running Ice, at which point they could target the forward once it becomes dull, but still, that's a pretty niche thing. Ninja, I really like this Ninja, but I just couldn't quite find room for it when I had to shuffle some of the forwards around for the new Onion Knights. But yeah, having this Ninja there just ready to block and pay to Lightning a break is great because it isn't a targeted break. You just break Ninja as well as the forward that blocks or is blocked by Ninja. So if your opponent has a forward and they attack with it and they forget Ninja's effect, you can just, break Ninja. And that's even if, let's say, your opponent attacks with BFA and they nuke your Edge, you block with this little guy, you pay 2 Lightning, you break BFA. Don't deal 10k to anything else because you haven't targeted it. All you're doing is just breaking Ninja and the forward that blocks it. Izayoi, you could go into water as well, you could throw a few splash colours in here as well. Get it? Splash water. But yeah. Edge making it so that you don't have to worry about the colour that you're playing for your CP, so you can then play Izayoi to then play a smaller Ninja as well if you wanted to. Obviously Gecko does the same thing and you could play Gecko into Izayoi into something else, which would be pretty cool, but yeah, really cool if you want to. And you could throw in some of the water ninjas into this deck as well if you wanted to add a bit more water, and then use, as I always, Illusion's S ability to choose up to 2 forwards. They can't attack or block, so good on your opponent's turn or your turn. And now moving on to the Onion Knight. So you've got the original Opus 1 Onion Knight, which is pretty good, but ironically, even though he has haste, I find him too slow, because firstly, he's really small, so chances are he's not going to be threatening anything, or just, you know, he might attack on like early turns or something like that, and you might be able to nuke something out of the way using Edge to then play him onto the field. But realistically, unless you're using Onion Knight to play one of the bigger Onion Knights, so namely the Fire Wind one, because you play him onto the field, you then pay 1 and dull Onion Knight, you've kind of paid 3 CP to then play Onion Knight onto the field. So that's still fine, but it is a good way to get around needing the fire and the wind for the multi-element Onion Knight if you are struggling to find that. So it might be worth considering throwing this Onion Knight in the deck if maybe you didn't want to include the fire or the wind, or you just wanted to take it in a different way entirely. Cecil, so yeah, really good protection. Maybe you just don't want to go the Onion Knight route of this taunt, just want to go pure ninjas. Cecil is fantastic in this deck because he protects all of your forwards, or your characters even, and he is a part of the 4 engine, so playing Cecil into Hooded Man or any of the other ninjas is really easy and just super effective, or works excellently with, Theodore. So Theodore, being able to use Theodore's entry ability, and then dulling, say, Izayo, Gecko, and Edge to then break something, oof, that's just powerful. So yeah, I just think Theodore and Cecil are a almost auto-include if you're running a ninjas deck and not going with the Onion Knight stuff, just want pure ninjas, because they are just so powerful. They've got a great protection and great offensive abilities, and I just love them, really. And there we go. I mean, like I said, there are loads of good cards you could include in this deck. You're playing lots of things onto the field for cheap, then probably the Opus 16 Zidane would be a good inclusion as well, because you play, let's say, 2 backups for only 1 CP each, and then you play Zidane. You start stealing your opponent's forwards as well. You don't have to worry so much then about Edge nuking things, because you're stealing their forwards, you know? And then hopefully Zidane is going to be attacking through as well, which you can use something like Ninja or Zangetsu to move things out of the way so he can attack, hopefully deal point damage, and also steal cards as well. But yeah, there's loads of good cards that work with this deck. What cards would you guys throw into this deck? Or what have you, if you've built previous versions of it? I really like this deck though. It's really fun. A bit weird, and it feels like it should be clunky, but it really isn't. It actually runs pretty smoothly. But, you know, Edge is an important part of that, and you want to make sure that you actually keep much of the elements equal, just so your hand doesn't brick too much, or that you can find ways to find the cards you need if you have to. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you don't, because about 50% of you guys that are watching my videos aren't actually subscribed, which is kind of strange, because how are you going to know when I put out more videos? You know? I'm not going to post it everywhere all the time. Don't have time for that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video if you've subscribed.